Why didn't Ho-Oh get its own movie and more shine as a legendary? Ho-Oh seems to be the most elusive compared to the other legendaries who have had multiple starring appearances, whereas Ho-Oh's appearances have always been very fleeting, usually preceding a new chapter in Ash's journey. What would a Ho-Oh movie have looked like? What if we had context as to why it appeared before Ash the day he started his journey as a Pokemon trainer? In this video, I'll be discussing Ho-Oh's history, as well as a rough treatment to what I call Ho-Oh and the Tower of Time. While you're here, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and without further ado, let's get into it.
Good luck.
My fascination with Ho-Oh started with everyone else when it appeared in the very first episode of Pokemon. A Pokemon that not even the Pokedex could identify. The only other time that's happened was when Gary battled Giovanni at the Viridian Gym, who was using an unidentified Pokemon. However, unlike Ash and Gary, the audience already knew that it was Mewtwo because it was shown in the very beginning of the show's intro and had its own movie shortly thereafter along with Mew. A movie that gave full context as to how it was created, its relationship with Giovanni, and everything that happened following its escape from the gym, leaving no stone unturned, whereas with Ho-Oh, those questions were never answered. Ash would eventually point out Articuno mistaking it for Ho-Oh, and not even Professor Oak knew what he was talking about. Fast forward to Johto Journeys, much like Mewtwo and Mew, who appear in the very beginning of the intro, Ho-Oh and Lugia do the same, appearing to clash with one another. Seeing this as a kid, I was led to believe that Ho-Oh itself would eventually get its own episode or its own movie. Unfortunately, it would only be mentioned in conversation and appear through flashbacks, each one shedding light on its backstory and validating what Ash had seen on his first day as a Pokemon trainer. In Ghost of a Chance, Ash, Brock, and Misty reach Ecruteak City, where they mistake the Burn Tower for the city's gym, ambushed by a group of Ghastly and Haunter who create the illusion of the tower's remains being on fire once again. Ecruteak's gym leader Morty intervenes and eventually tells Ash that Ho-Oh has not been seen for 3 centuries, explaining that the tower was the only place where it would descend and make peaceful contact with a select chosen few, peace that was disrupted by men who wanted to seize Ho-Oh's power for themselves, which resulted in the fire that destroyed the tower, also saying that the second tower is actually a copy of the original, created with the hopes of attracting Ho-Oh back to Ecruteak, which is actually contrary to the story of another legendary who I'll get to in a few. In For Ho-Oh the Bells Toll, Yucine reveals Ho-Oh's fierce anger with humans and how the legendary beasts, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou came into existence. That there were 3 Pokemon that were unable to escape from the tower's fire. Ho-Oh would reincarnate each of them from the forces of nature, the northern wind, volcano, and thunder, instructing them to observe humans and wait for the day when humans and Pokemon can coexist in cooperation and harmony. Team Rocket steals the crystal bells from the new Tin Tower, upsetting the wild Pokemon nearby. Jessie breaks one of the crystals, sending the Pokemon further into a frenzy, which prompts them to encase the surrounding area in webs. Suicune then appears, restoring balance to the forest and the Pokemon. Suicune takes note of Ash, as the two share a moment where they just stare at each other until they are interrupted by Yucine, who proves exactly why Ho-Oh hasn't returned in 3 centuries. The episode ends with a rainbow appearing over the city, implying that Ho-Oh was somewhere nearby observing. This episode was then followed by a minor appearance via a flashback in Pop Goes the Sneasel. A story is told of Ho-Oh reappearing to end a battle fought by humans and Pokemon, burning their weapons and totally decimating the battlefield. It was from the ashes of Ho-Oh's flames that rejuvenated the land once again. One singular flame remained, and it was preserved and used to light the torch to signify the start of the Silver Cup. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ho-Oh's counterpart, Lugia. It's said in some adaptations of the anime and games that the 2 towers in Ecruteak were actually home to both Ho-Oh and Lugia, with Ho-Oh in the Bell Tower and Lugia in the Brass Tower. In this telling of the legend, Lugia's tower was struck by lightning and burnt to the ground, with Lugia fleeing to the seas and never returning, while Ho-Oh would leave its bell tower completely intact in search of a pure-hearted trainer, and Lugia beneath the seas, waiting for the same, which doesn't at all go with what's established in the anime because it would negate why Entei, Suicune, and Raikou even exist. For it to make sense, both towers would have had to be burned down, and the thunderstorm that forced Lugia away would have happened before the events at the Bell Tower. Lugia would get its own movie in Pokemon 2000, and his legend was closely tied to the legendary birds Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos. As a kid, I always wondered why Ho-Oh was not paired with Lugia in the film, and I tried to imagine a plot that would involve Ho-Oh, but eventually I realized, storytelling-wise, it wouldn't have worked. There's no way Ho-Oh would have fit into the storyline without undermining Lugia and the legendary birds in some way, shape, or form. The only way it would have worked is if Lawrence III had already captured Ho-Oh and was using it along with his flying palace to capture the others. Limiting Ho-Oh to just a pawn and a secret weapon wouldn't have done it justice, so that idea is scrapped. Ho-Oh would again be mentioned in Master Quest along with the King of Pokélanis, who wanted to take over the world and attempted to use Ho-Oh to do so. However, Ho-Oh instead destroyed his kingdom, and the king was sealed in a stone orb and eventually freed by Ash. In addition to its own movie, Lugia would be given its own episode, where its baby will be captured with Ash and friends helping to save it. Fortunately, I don't think this episode really counts in the grand scheme of things. Ho-Oh would briefly appear in Lucario and the Mystery of Mew in the very beginning. Unfortunately, that wasn't Ho-Oh, and it was Mew pretending to be Ho-Oh. In 2010, the trailer for the 13th Pokemon film was released, showing Ho-Oh and Lugia somewhere in the stratosphere fighting. This trailer would come shortly after the release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. A Ho-Oh vs. Lugia movie would never come to fruition, as the film ended up becoming Zoroark, Master of Illusions. Though the film did not feature Ho-Oh, it did feature shiny versions of Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, who were guardians of the city in the story. Celebi was also featured in the film after being the starring legendary in Pokemon Forever. Now my thing is this: Entei had its own movie, Suicune had its own movie, and Raikou was the starring legendary in Pokemon Chronicles. But Ho-Oh couldn't get one movie? What do they have against Ho-Oh? Bruh. In 2015, Lugia was brought back again in Hoopa and the Clash of Ages. Anyway, eventually, in 2017, Ho-Oh was given a bit more shine in Pokemon I Choose You. It wasn't a Ho-Oh movie per se, more so a retelling of Ash's story, but unlike the television series, Ho-Oh leaves behind a rainbow wing and is the focal point of the story. Ho-Oh appears before Ash at the end of the film for a short time, where it battles Ash and Pikachu. Ho-Oh lands one Sacred Fire, and that's basically it. The film didn't do Ho-Oh justice in my opinion. It does appear one last time in Pokemon Journeys, flying alongside Lugia for a few seconds and flying off again. In comparison to the other legendaries, Ho-Oh probably has about 10 minutes of screen time altogether. In Pokemon Generations Reawakening, we get a special entirely dedicated to Ho-Oh's story. In Pokemon Evolutions, the show, Ho-Oh does appear shortly, but the focus is placed on Lugia this time, but a great special nonetheless. Both of which served as an inspiration for what Ho-Oh and the Tower of Time would be cinematically. Because I loved Pokemon 2000, Pokemon 3, and Forever, Ho-Oh and the Tower of Time wouldn't replace any of them. In fact, I will put it in the place of Pokemon I Choose You instead. In order to avoid its plot being too close to Forever, or Zoroark Master of Illusions, and the Pokemon Adventures manga, it won't include Celebi, who can time travel. If I was able to meet with Pokemon executives who are in charge of what films get made, this is what I would pitch to them.
Eureka! I've just been inspired. Easel works a little bit rusty. Don't touch that. Okay, introducing
Pokemon Ho-Oh and the Tower of Time gives context to why Ho-Oh appeared before Ash the day he started his journey to become a Pokemon trainer. Ash and friends make their way to Ecruteak City, a modern town that still holds on to its ancient culture, Japanese architecture. After the introductory Pokemon battle and meeting the townsfolk, they are given a tour of the city and they stumble across the ruins of the burnt tower, where they learn of Ho-Oh's unfortunate legend as well as the creation of Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. They are then brought to the new Tin Tower, a replica of the original, in anticipation of Ho-Oh's eventual return. Much like the television show, Ho-Oh has not returned for 3 centuries. dimming any hopes of its return. They all agree that what the people did to Ho-Oh was wrong, and that they wish there was a way they could make Ho-Oh return. The character who was giving Ash and friends the tour is the daughter, friend, wife of who will build the third tower. She is a lover of Pokemon and is not aware of the inventor's true plans. Because the second Tin Tower's attempt at luring Ho-Oh back has proven unsuccessful, in response, a third tower is eventually built. This tower is technologically advanced and houses a time capsule created with the sole intention of traveling back to the past to prevent the fire at the Tin Tower from happening. However, the inventor of the third tower is the descendant of the one who instigated the conflict in the first place. He actually believes Ho-Oh is a cruel, evil Pokemon and seeks to control its power instead, much like his ancestors. His humorous and otherwise friendly intellectual personality is a front for a more sinister nature. He plans on helping his ancestors capture Ho-Oh by bringing Pokeball technology from the present to the past, also inventing a control ring that functions similar to a Pokeball but immediately forces a wild Pokemon under the control of the user. This is what he plans to use to control Ho-Oh. The locals of Ecruteak do not support this, as they believe Entei, Suicune, and Raikou's judgment of humans will determine Ho-Oh's return and it should not be forced, also asserting that technology should not be used to tamper with time. Ash and friends are reluctant about the inventor's plans but relent due to their shared passion for Pokemon. When they return to the past, they find the Tin Tower as it once was, undamaged and pristine. They do not tell the residents of Ecruteak that they are from the future when they are questioned about the way they are dressed. They find out that Ho-Oh visits the Tin Tower infrequently, and when it does, it only appears before the guardians of the tower, and that it is not there at the moment, which leaves Ash and friends time to assimilate into the past Ecruteak's time and culture. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the group, the inventor is preparing for Ho-Oh's return by splintering off from the group and meeting with his great-grandfather and his followers, alerting them of the future and that their attempts to capture Ho-Oh would fail, further explaining that they will fail again without his assistance. They are given Pokeballs and a few control rings to capture strong Pokemon to attack and weaken Ho-Oh. The inventor, his great-grandfather, and his minions devise a plan to ambush Ho-Oh, aware that it only appears before a select few. They plan to attack and overpower the guardians of the temple prior to Ho-Oh's arrival and disguise themselves using the guardians' clothing. Once Ho-Oh enters the shrine room, they will take Ho-Oh by surprise and attack. After a series of humorous moments and a battle or two, Ash and friends reflect on the relationships they have with their Pokemon, recognizing that their bond with them goes beyond just trainer and Pokemon, and that it is love and friendship that makes it meaningful. Ash talks about meeting Pikachu and how their relationship changed when he put himself in harm's way to protect Pikachu when they were attacked by a group of Sparrow. And it was shortly after that Ho-Oh appeared before him, to the shock of those listening. The others share the same sentiments about their Pokemon. Their Pokemon are released from their Pokeballs to share their war moment with their trainers. This moment of camaraderie almost seems to facilitate Ho-Oh's return as the bells begin to ring loudly. The inventor's plan is now set in motion as they were already on standby to intercept the Tower Guardians. Ash and friends see Ho-Oh fly. They are revived and transformed into an Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. In the midst of this, the inventor makes his move, pressing a switch in his hand that triggers a trap that launches a black ring at Ho-Oh's neck, sending it into a rage as it tries to resist it. Entei, Suicune, and Raikou watch Ho-Oh in confusion, as well as Ash and everyone around. The device strapped onto Ho-Oh is the strongest version of it, forcing Ho-Oh to succumb to its control. Confronted by his former friends of his intentions, he does not care as his mission is accomplished. He is now in control of Ho-Oh. Consumed with this new power, he then orders Ho-Oh to destroy everything. Ho-Oh does this as Ash, his friends, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou avoid its attacks while the minions are caught in the crossfire. Their goal is to get Ho-Oh to snap out of it. However, they are easily overpowered by the legendary. Suicune using Aurora Beam, Entei using Flamethrower, and Raikou using Thunderbolt try to quell Ho-Oh to some success. Ho-Oh attacks the three with a Sacred Fire sending them all back temporarily, whereas Ash, the inventor's friend, Misty, and Brock attempt to stop it with their words and futile attacks, much to the inventor's enjoyment. Entei, Suicune, and Raikou watch the protagonists intently, acknowledging their efforts and get back up. Entei attacks the inventor's Magneton with a flamethrower, while Suicune attacks the inventor directly with a bubble beam. Raikou, Pikachu, and the other Pokemon continue to try to stop Ho-Oh. Entei and Suicune join the others for one combined attack in unison that clashes with Ho-Oh's Sacred Fire, overwhelming it and stopping Ho-Oh, breaking the control ring. Taking damage from the combined attack, Ho-Oh falls into the tower's fire. Ash and his friends lament that their attempts to change the past failed, as if their involvement made it worse. People and Pokemon from all over the area congregate, along with Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. Unable to live with his actions and his failure, the inventor gets up and runs back into the burning tower almost obsessively to share the same fate as Ho-Oh, despite pleas from Ash and friends not to do so. Everyone intently waits and watches to see what has become of Ho-Oh. Much like a phoenix, Ho-Oh rises from the flames, totally enveloped as if rejuvenated by them. The flames around it subside, as well as the flames in the tower. Ho-Oh gazes upon the people and Pokemon of Ecruteak, particularly Ash and Pikachu, for a moment, with a more calm look in its eyes. It is understood that Ho-Oh sees the pureness of Ash's intentions and actions. It makes its signature cry, which is acknowledged by Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, who respond to it. Ho-Oh then flies off into the dark sky that splits open, revealing the sunlight, while Entei, Suicune, and Raikou each jump into different directions. History repeats itself. When the group returns to their own time, they shut down the time capsule for good. The events of what happened stayed the same, with the original tower still burnt and the second replica still there. The inventor's presumed death in the past caused the third tower to not be there in the present. However, unlike before, Ash finally understands why he saw Ho-Oh the day he became a Pokemon trainer. If you made it to the end of this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure, as always, to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.